workshop with you guys at University of Windsor Video Game Design Club. Today we'll be making a simple boat shooter local co-op, meaning that our boats will be controlled by our arrow keys and WASD, and you should be able to shoot each other. We'll start off by telling you that we are using Unity. The version I'm using is 2021.3.28, although any Unity above 2019 should work. If we go to our projects and we create a new project, it's a 3D game, so we'll be calling it Boat Game 4, and make sure it is on 3D, and we're just gonna create a project. Now Unity is gonna take a second to load. So while that's happening, I'm gonna tell you that Unity has backtracked on its recent controversy, and as of September 30th, Unity takes no money before $1 million, and after that, you are subjected to a 2.5% revenue share, or their download-based system. Now that we've loaded in, you can see in our window there is a series of panels that is our game engine scene. Over here we have our hierarchy showing the objects currently loaded in, and as you can see, as I select them, they become highlighted in the game scene. On the right you have the inspector that provides the properties of the objects in our sample scene, and we're gonna an important one to note is our transform function that can change the position, rotation, and size of our objects. So we're going to start off by creating we're going to right click on our hierarchy, and we're on the empty space here, and we're going to go down to we're going to create an empty game object, nothing in it, and we're going to call it boat. Now this boat will be the parent function for all the values that the boat will hold. Since it has nothing in it, let's create we'll right click once again on our hierarchy, and we're going to go to 3D objects, and we're going to select capsule. Now this will be what our player is. Let's set the location 0, 0, and 0, and we're just going to drag it underneath the boat. As you can see, it's by itself right now, boat is separate, but if we drag it underneath, it becomes part of the boat parent. The boat is the parent, the capsule is the child. So we're going to set everything to 0, 0, 0, and for the boat and the capsule, and we're going to rotate the capsule by 90 degrees on the x-axis, not the y-axis. Once it's set like so, you know what, we'll rotate it. Yeah. Once it's set like so, as you can see, it has a collider already. This is a physics-based collider. So if I were to have two of these and I were to try to ram them into each other, they would bounce off each other and not connect. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to also add, right click over here again, we're gonna make a 3D object, cube, and let's put it once again 0, 0, 0, and we're gonna put it underneath our boat. Now we're gonna name this cube. You can right click, rename, and we're gonna call it hitbox, and you can also change the name over here. And we're going to make it so that it is invisible. We'll go down to the mesh renderer and just click on this box here, and that will render the visual invisible. And now this hitbox will be what we'll use to check if a cannonball has gone through our boat. So it's looking a little bit small. So if we go down to the size of the box collider, we can change it Y, X, and Z. So I'm just going to adjust it so that it is around our capsule, like so. It doesn't really matter which values you put in, so long as it is good. I'm using 1.75, 1.6, and 0.7. And now we're going to create one last thing. We're going to create an empty game object, and we're going to call it barrel. And once again, we're just going to drag it underneath boat so that all these values are part of our boat object. And this barrel is going to be set it to 0, 0, 0. And from there, I'm going to say y is equal to 1.1, just 1, and z is equal to x is equal to 1. So now as you can see, all three values are part of our boat. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that the boat has a rigid body so that physics can be applied to this function. So on the parent, we're going to add a component. We're going to type in RI, and as you can see, it pops up rigid body. It's built in Unity function, and this is essentially what applies physics, such as gravity. So if you switch from your scene to your game window, like so, when you press play, your object falls off the screen. That's no bueno, so we're just gonna turn gravity off for this tutorial. Now that we've got everything set up, we can start with the code. We go down to our add component, and we can type in boat collider. Press enter for new script, and this will be making a new C# script that is applied to our boat. As you can see, it showed up in the folders down here under project, and if we open, right click on boat collider and open, we have the code, and we trust our authors to run. So now starting off, we're gonna define a few variables. We're gonna start with public boat collider. I don't want to call it that. I want a boat controller. Sorry. So this will be our boat controller script. I'm just going to rename it to boat controller. So now we're making in our boat controller script, we're going to make a public transform orientation, and this will be a function that stores the value of what direction our boat is facing. We need a rigid body, RB, a public float player speed is equal to 2.0 f, and that'll be the speed of our player. We're going to take private float x input, private float y input, and these will be the values that will store the input that we receive from the keyboard. Float x float X rotation, float Y rotation. These will just be placeholder values when we're creating the movement, and public float sensitivity X, public float sensitivity Y, and we'll set these to 200F. And this will be the sensitivity of our controls. Now we want to say, so now that is all we need so far for the movement. If we go down to start, we want, this is a start function, is what runs at the very beginning of when you play the play cycle in Unity. And once you do it, it runs this function. So for this code, we want to say RB is equal to get component rigid body. And this will grab the component rigid body to use from the value from the object. And we'll say X input is equal to 0, Y input is equal to 0, and these values will start off as 0 since we don't want our boat moving. So if we create, what we're going to do is we're going to create private void my input, and this will be the function that takes in the input from the player. We say if input dot regular input, no X, just input dot get key code dot up arrow. Keep in mind that it's case sensitive. This will receive input from the, this will be checking if the key up arrow is being pressed. So we want to say when up arrow is pressed, Y input is equal to 1. That way, every time your up is pressed, we're going in a positive direction. So we can copy paste that and just switch it to the down. Capital D, D-O-W-N, down arrow. And in here, the Y input will be -1. And we'll do the same for the left and right keys. So we'll say here, left arrow, we're going to say X input is equal to 1, -1, and let's set this as left arrow and the top one as right. So let's make this one right arrow. X input is equal to +1, and input.get key code left arrow input is equal to -1. X input is equal to -1. Let me zoom in case you can't see. And there is our code. Now if we go to update, we will call this every time the frames update. Now by itself it's not doing anything, it's just taking input. So we want to create a function and we're going to call it private void move player. And we're going to say in this, we're going to say Y rotation plus equals X input multiplied by time dot delta time, capital T in the delta time, multiplied by sensitivity X. And we're going to say X rotation minus equals y input multiplied by time dot delta time multiplied by sensitivity of y. This will be checking the rotation of our boat. Now we're going to say x rotation is equal to capital M math f dot capital Z clamp x rotation, y rotation, and 0. This will be turning our input multiplied by the delta time multiplied by the sensitivity into a degree format so that we can say orientation, the orientation of the boat, dot rotation, application of a rotation is equal to quaternion dot Euler 0 comma y rotation comma 0. This will take the y rotation and vector 3 move direction is equal to orientation dot forward multiplied by y input. And this will be the direction that we update to, and we say finally RB dot add force move direction dot normalized multiplied by player speed multiplied by 10F comma force mode capital M force mode dot force. Now we've created our move function. It's not being called, so we don't want to call it an update because update is called every time a frame is loaded. So instead we want to use void fixed update. And in this we'll say move player. Now that that's done, we can go back to our scene, and under our boat we click on our boat and we just drag it to the orientation. So now we can move around and we can fall off this screen. Now my boat keeps moving even though it stopped. That is because I forgot to add a system where it stops moving when you let go of the arrow. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this, paste it, and we're going to say if input.key up, this will check when the key has been released, key code.left arrow, or 2 line arrows above the backslash. You'll find this above your enter key. Or input.getKey up, right arrow, then x input is equal to 0. And we're just going to copy that and do the same for up arrow and down arrow. and we're going to say y input is equal to 0. Now, if we go back to our scene and press play, it does stop moving, but it keeps on sliding. That's because our drag is 0. So if you go in our boat, under the rigid body, we want our drag to be greater than 0. I set it to 1, and hopefully that stops moving it. Now it looks like it's moving in the wrong direction. That is simply because our capsule is rotated to the wrong direction. So if we change under our capsule the direction to 0, to the rotation to 90, all values are 90, that should be good. Now the camera is a little flat, as you can see from the game scene. So if you go to your main camera and you increase the position Y up, and you can see here it makes a little window, and we rotate the Z value, not the Z value, I'm sorry, the X value, increase it, then our boat looks a bit more like we can see it from up above. Now our boat is missing its C. We can create one by creating a 3D object, plane, and we'll just call it C. Now we want to, in our C, we want to turn off our mesh collider. We won't be needing it. And we're going to create a material in our project files. We're going to right click, create, down here under material, new material, and we'll just call it blue. Now we're going to change the blue value into something blue, and we're going to turn it from opaque to transparent. And if we drag it onto our boat, onto our C, as you can see, it is now blue. And hopefully when we drag our boat down, we should be able to see our boat, but albeit it is not showing up. Oh, that's because our blue under material, if you go back, return to your blue material, you click on the color. We want to, once you choose the color here, you want to go down to your A value and make it a bit transparent. Move it so that it is less. And now when we drag our boat down and switch to game, you can see a little bit right there. It is transparent water. There are much fancier ways to render water, but this seems pretty good to me. Now once again, we are able to move our boat around. Next thing we want to do is we want to create a way to shoot cannons from our cannonballs from our boat. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on our hierarchy. We're going to create a 3D object sphere. It's quite large. Let me move it so that you can see it. My mic cut out. Our scale, let's scale it down to half since its cannonballs aren't that large. And we're going to give it a component rigid body. Now once you've done that, we're gonna give it a C# script, and we're gonna call it, so you go down to your add component, you'll type in timer, and once again you click on new script, and we create an add. In timer, this will be a simple script that will remove the object we don't need update, that will delete the object once a certain time has passed. So we say public float time, And in start, we say destroy, capital destroy, game object with a capital O, time. This is a Unity function that after a certain amount of time, it deletes the game object. So if we return to our game and press play, our sphere deletes itself, albeit too quickly because we have not set a value. Right now it's at 0, so it deletes itself immediately. Let's give it 2, so after 2 seconds, it removes itself. As you can see, it deleted itself from the scene, but not before knocking our boat and applying a physics that moved it down. We're just going to ignore that for now. Make sure it has gravity. It doesn't really matter, but I like my cannonballs to fall, and it disappeared. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our boat. As you can see, our hitbox is looking a little odd. That is because we changed the constraints of our capsule. We're just going to restrict the X, decrease it back to something like 1, and change the Z to 1.75. Now that looks pretty good to me. Yeah. Now we'll go down to our hitbox, and we're going to add a component. We're going to call this work collider. We're going to actually, don't call it collider. We're going to call it collision. New script, collision. Now if we open collision, we're going to give it a variable. We're going to call it public float health. We're going to set it to 3. And we're going to say below that, void on trigger, enter, collider, other, and we're going to say if other dot game object dot tag is equal to bullet, then we say print enter health minus equal 1, and if health is equal to 0, then we destroy, not in there, and if health is equal to 0, then we say destroy transform dot root dot game object. Now this script will destroy the boat object once its health is equal to -1 whenever a object with the tag of bullet enters the hitbox. Now that that is done, we can go down to our scene and go to our boat, go back to our boat controller script, and write a function that shoots the bullet. So if we go past fixed input, we create a function, and we're going to call it public void shoot. This is going to need a few variables, so if we scroll back up and we say public float public transform barrel. This will hold the value of the barrel location that we'll shoot our object from. Public game object cannonball. This will store the version of the object that we want to spawn. Public float force. This will be the value that force will apply to the object, and we say private float last shot and public float cooldown. Now these two functions are to set a timer so that our boat cannot shoot cannonballs infinitely. So undershoot, that should be two O's, we're gonna say if, let's make that look a little neater, if time dot capital T time dot time lowercase t time minus last shot less than cooldown, then nothing else last shot is equal to time dot time game object bullet is equal to instantiate cannonball, comma, barrel position, comma, barrel rotation. And bullet, this will spawn our sphere. We're going to use the sphere for this. Bullet dot get component rigid body dot velocity, lowercase velocity, is equal to barrel dot forward, lowercase f on the forward, multiplied by force. Now our shoot function is made. We want to put it under our void fixed update since it's a time-based system. If input dot get key code dot slash, then we say shoot. If we return to our scene and fix our error, these should have periods in them, not spaces or nothing. And X input should regular input. That's because our barrel rotation should be lowercase. So now if we return to our scene, the errors are gone. And now when we rotate our boat, we forgot we forgot to assign a barrel position and a cannonball and all those values. So for the barrel position, that's obviously the barrel that we defined at the beginning. For the cannonball, we want to use sphere, but not the game object sphere. We want to use a prefab of the game sphere. So if we drag our sphere into our project and we go to our boat and drag the sphere from our project, not the game scene. In fact, we'll delete it from here. So we're going to use this sphere in our files, and we're going to drag it to cannonball, and we're going to set the force to 20 and our cooldown to 2. Now as you can see, it tosses the ball as it goes. Make sure under sphere it has a sphere collider, a rigid body, and the tags, we should create a bullet tag. Bullet like so. And our sphere needs a layer, and we're going to create a new layer, and we're also going to call it bullet. So what we're going to do is we're going to set the layer to bullet, the tag to bullet, and we're going to make sure that bullet doesn't interfere with our physics layer. How we can do that, we're going to create another layer, and we're going to call it physics. And this will be the layer that our capsule will be in. So if we set our physics layer so that when balls hit the other boat, the boat doesn't go flying. So make sure the layer is bullet, the capsule is physics, and to change the values we go to Edit, Project Settings, and once we're in the project settings we go to Physics. We'll get a lot of things. We want to go to Physics, and we want to go scroll down, and you see this little matrix here. We want to see where physics intersects with bullet, and we're going to disable that. That way physics and bullet, they never intercede. Now that things are going well, we can copy our boat and paste it, and we now have our second boat. Now if we play the game, we can turn around. Both are controlled by the arrow key, so we're going to change that in just a second. And when the hitbox, our hitbox is not a real hitbox, it is a physical based hitbox, so we want to switch that to is triggered. So make sure both of these hitboxes are on is triggered. And when the ball goes through, as you can see down here under our console, an enter was clicked. So if I keep pressing slash, our right object should delete itself. Perfect. And now we're in the final stretch of the game. What we want to do is we want to not do that. We want to move our first boat to the left here, and in our second boat we're going to go to our second boat, and we're going to delete the script, remove the component. We're going to go to boat controller, we're going to press Control C, Control V, or copy and paste it. And when we click on it, we want to change this to boat controller 1. And now that should delete the error here. Perfect. In our boat controller 1, our new boat controller, we want to change the key codes so that it takes W, S, D, and A instead of left arrow, right arrow, up arrow, down arrow, WSASD. And instead of key code slash, we're going to take key code R. Now if we close it and press play, I am using arrows to move the left object, and I am using WASD, but we forgot to add it to the object. My mistake. We just add the component, the new boat controller we've provided, and once again we fill all these values with the things that we have. Force 20, cooldown 2. Now that that's done, we have WASD controlling the right one and arrow keys controlling the left one, as you can see. Now if we press slash, it shoots a ball, not really aligned. So let me change that. Make sure that the barrel is aligned. And is this barrel aligned as well? Not really. Let's change that. So now it shoots about around where the barrel should be. But it is too close, so just move it a little bit forward so that it's not intersecting with the hitbox, and we're going to move the hitbox a little bit backwards with Z. Just play around with the values. We just don't want when we spawn the ball to be within our own hitbox. That way we die whenever three bullets are tossed. As you can see, it's happening anyways. So we are just going to keep moving the barrel a little forward, until it's outside of the hitbox. Now if we rotate and press slash, as you can see, when the ball intersects with our other box collider, it presses enter. Tremendous. Now the last thing I want to do is we want to create a little constraint, little box so that our boats don't go off the edge. We can do this by creating a 3D objects cube, and I'm just going to position the cube over here and expand it y-wise, x-wise. And if things should have been going well, our boats will run into it along with other boats. Now we'll just copy paste that, bring it down here, and rotate it by 90 degrees with the Y value. Control C, Control V. Copy that once more, and bring it over here. Now we have 3 walls with box colliders, physical ones, and now our boats should not fall off the screen away from our water. And now we can play the game like so. And that's about all that I've had for you. You can use your own 3D objects to create lovely scenes, but that's a video for another time.